Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day to day lives. Let's start with the video. My husband and I got married in our mid-20s. We were both well off. After we got married, we bought a house together. We used to live in my apartment, but we had already decided to get a better place for us to raise our family. We moved out, and he sold his previous place. His was more of a bachelor pad. We loved living together. We both spent quality time with each other and had our time too. 6 months after we got married, my mother in law wanted to move in with us, saying that our house was big and nice and we didn't need that much space to be alone. My husband and I didn't agree. We had bought the house on our own and we were very aware of the amount of space, so we bought it. My husband refused her. My husband and mother-in-law's relationship was okay-ish. She doesn't understand that my husband doesn't like other people poking their noses into every single thing he does. He tells me that his mother is too attached to him. She had even tried to stop him from moving out when he was 18. His mother and father had separated when he was a teenager. So when his father used to come to pick him up every other week, his mother would create a huge scene to stop him. He just wanted to go with his father when it was his turn. His mother had also caused multiple breakups between him and his previous girlfriends. He couldn't even have his friends over because she would either start crying and tell his friends he doesn't spend time with her, or she would sit there with them in his room the whole time. It would get very awkward. When he turned 18, he immediately moved into his father's house and then went off to university. He had learned how to invest and save with his father's help, so after completing university, he got his place. He had kept minimal contact with his mother, as when he moved out, it didn't go down well. Her request to move in with us was out of the question. He had made me and my family aware of all of this when we had started seriously dating. Though he maintained minimal contact, everything that my mother-in-law needed was paid for by my husband. He had set boundaries, though, and they would not be crossed. My mother-in-law didn't work, so even maintenance was paid for by my husband. After he refused, she started to spam me. The few times I would answer, she would either try to emotionally blackmail me or, when that didn't work, would cuss me out. I didn't budge, though. I blocked her number and recorded our conversations just in case. I had other things I had to focus on and didn't have time to waste on unnecessary drama. When she failed to get our attention, she would exceed her budget and send requests for more money. We had recently gotten married and bought our own house. Though we were comfortable, we had separate and combined financial plans that we worked on. My husband declined her requests. He spoke to me about it, and I told him that my family doesn't ask us to pay for them, and neither does his father. His mother had her degree and could work if she wanted to. Even without my husband paying for her, she would be very comfortable as she had gotten her part from the divorce. But she didn't stop acting up. She then tried to get in contact with my family. My mother didn't put up with her and told her off, telling her that this was her daughter and son-in-law's house and she had no right to demand more money from them. At first, Mom tried to make her understand that we were working on building our own family and asked her to give us our space. But she didn't seem to understand the nice way. She stopped calling them after that. My father-in-law cut off contact with her completely after my husband moved out and hasn't been in contact ever since. A few days passed and we hadn't heard from her, which we thought was a good thing. About 10 days later, I got a call from my mom asking me and my husband to come over. She sounded so pissed off. I tried asking her what had happened, but she insisted on us coming over. We went the next day, and she showed us a Facebook group for mothers. She then proceeded to show us what my mother-in-law had posted about me. Mother-in-law had tried to narrate a story about how I was the worst daughter-in-law and how I took her son away from her. She proceeded to say that I wouldn't let her meet her son and that she didn't have enough money to get by. She said she was struggling. What rubbish. That woman was freeloading off of my husband and living as comfortably as anybody could. She had called me a gold digger who was living off of my husband and eating all his money. She continued saying that I had made him completely cut her off and called her names when she tried to contact me. Though it didn't affect me much. My husband was enraged. My mother then showed us posts made by her calling my mother-in-law out. My mother had made quite a few posts about what was going on. She posted that my mother-in-law hadn't paid her water bill in years, as she was freeloading off of my husband. She continued by saying that we had recently gotten married and bought a house together, and mother-in-law had demanded to move in. She called her out on cussing me out and troubling the whole family by spam calling us. She even told everybody the amount of money my husband spent taking care of her needs and how she started exceeding her budget, asking for more money while we were trying to build a family. Everybody in the group was outraged. We saw their responses. There were over 1,000 people in that group. Some of them asked her how she could be so selfish, while others called her out on her values for faking a story. Some even said that mother-in-law had asked them for money and they were about to give it to her because they pitied her living situation. They were furious. All of them were requesting the admin to ban her. My mom then asked my husband if it was okay to post a backstory about what had happened during the separation, and he gave the nod, saying that she had tried to taint my name. He questioned how many groups she, mother-in-law, had posted this in. He apologized to me and my family and said that he would handle her legally if needed, once and for all, because she had mentioned my full name there, and this could have gotten out of hand. My parents agreed. I didn't want my reputation to be dragged down unnecessarily. My mother then posted the backstory about the whole separation, and people were disgusted. My husband's mother was still in the group trying to refuse, but that had shut her up. We went back home after dinner that day. My husband was still pissed. When we got home, he just sat on the couch and pulled me into his arms, apologizing for what had happened. I told him it was okay and that it wasn't his fault. He kept apologizing, saying that he would make sure that I wouldn't have to go through this again, and he kissed me on the temple. The next day, my mom called and told me that my mother-in-law had been banned and reported. In the afternoon, my mom called me and my husband told us that my husband's mother was outside their place screaming about bloody murder. The woman was crazy. She told my husband that she would call the cops on his mother. My husband told her to go ahead and warned my mom to be careful, as this had happened a few years ago and his mother had smashed his father's car after he had moved into his house. My mom immediately called the cops. That didn't go well either. She kept screaming about how my mother had lied and embarrassed her on the group and that her account had gotten so many reports that it was banned by Facebook. She kept ignoring the officers' warnings and started screaming at them too. We were on our way to my mom's place, but it was an hour away from our location. Dad was home, though. By the time we reached there, mother-in-law had been detained by the police because she had pushed an officer. My dad had called his lawyer up. Once my husband reached, he made sure that everybody was okay. My father-in-law came over too. My father-in-law had already gotten a restriction order and asked us to file for one too. We stayed over at my parents' place that day just in case. We have currently filed for a restraining order. I'll update you once it goes through. 3 months later. My husband and I and my family have been granted a restriction order. My mother-in-law had charges pressed against her for trespassing, causing chaos, and pushing the police officer. My husband cut her off immediately after what happened at my parents' place with the money and everything. She was informed through our lawyer that she would not be getting any money from my husband anymore. She said she would take him to court, and our lawyer told her clearly that my husband and I didn't owe her anything, and she had no legal grounds to sue either of us. This is the last update. NTA, mother-in-law is entitled AF. I bet she wanted to cause a tiff between OP and her son to break them up by trying to move in. NTA, OP's husband seems to have tried to keep his mother as far away as possible. Mother-in-law seems toxic, AF. No wonder her husband divorced her. Good riddance. Who the hell wants to move into a newly married couple's house? NTA, girl, keep her far. I, 24, female, got married yesterday in the courthouse to my now dear husband, 24, male. Just the two of us, his best friend and my best friend. A private short ceremony, and after that, just us two had a wonderful day. We will have a ceremony in church and a reception with close friends and family in exactly a year planned, and the invites already sent out. And it was a known secret that we would marry alone before the church wedding and not invite anyone except our best man, maid of honor. Long before I got married, my maternal grandfather told me if I eloped without his blessing, he would be pissed and have a serious talk with my mom. And apparently, he felt the need to not only talk to my mom, but to me about marrying in the courthouse without him and his blessing. My mom ignored it and told me it was my husband's and my rightful decision to choose how we are getting married. And she backs me up. So I thought I was through with it. But then he called me to berate me on my disrespectful decision and my lack of manners, and that I should have gotten at least his blessing for marriage in the courthouse. I am a pretty temperamental person, and I kept a lot to myself when it comes to my grandfather because he will get upset over literally anything. But this time, my temper got the better of me, and I blew up. I told him that I did not need his blessing on shit, and that we lived in the modern age, and I am free, legally and morally, to choose how to be married without getting consent from anybody but my husband. And if he found it so disrespectful and awful that I did what I did, then he won't need to attend the church wedding. He reacted by calling me a disgrace and an AH because you are not allowed to talk to old people like that. My grandmother backs him up by telling me I am morally in the wrong for hurting his feelings by not inviting him to my courthouse wedding, and then yelling at him when he talked about his hurt with me. So AITA for yelling at him after his saying that I should have gotten his blessing? P.S. English is not my first language, so take a cookie for every mistake you find. NTA, it's a generational thing. Your grandparents aren't wrong for their beliefs either. I think it's just what they were taught to believe. They probably have been taught by their parents that eloping is bad, but like you said, times change, and today that's not a bad thing, as you were probably taught and have learned. You stood up to your beliefs and your husband's, and that's all you can do, and it's a respectable thing. It's a gray area where you and your grandparents will probably have to have a long conversation on how you agree to disagree. But I don't think either one of you is wrong, you just hold different beliefs. NTA, so often old people just suck with their ridiculous demands for preferential treatment. I would probably have told him that yes, he is old, but if he keeps up this behavior, he won't be getting any older, just for spite. I'd seriously consider inviting neither of these grandparents to your church wedding unless they apologize and agree to keep their mouths shut on the day. I'm seriously sick of the geriatrics acting like dicks and being allowed to get away with it. Don't be the bigger person, be the bigger dick. I, 19 male, have been arguing with my mom, 48 female, and stepdad, 47 male, about the fact that my sister, 24 female, and her husband, 26 male, don't want our sister, 22 female, to hold their newborn baby. She's not even a week old yet. Beth's reasoning is that Carol was and is emotionally abusive to most of our family, us included, and refused to change her behavior or go to therapy during Beth's pregnancy. Carol regularly started fights with the five of us whenever Beth and her husband came to visit for dinners and such. I, who has only recently gotten my first job and don't have a license or a car, have been stuck at home dealing with the abuse my whole life, while my mother was working all day, to no fault of her own, and have been forced to not stand up for myself as my mom and stepdad see it as instigating. This resulted in Beth and I banding together and more or less ousting Carol. We just recently had a baby shower that the baby attended because she came a bit early and most of the 15-ish guests were allowed to hold her. Carol was not. Later, after everyone had gone home and the seven of us were back at my mom's house, my stepdad pulled Beth and her husband aside in front of everyone and without leaving the room and lobbied for them to let Carol hold the baby, despite them putting this boundary in place before we even knew the baby's gender. Naturally, Beth and her husband were unwavering in their decision, and I supported them. After they left, I got chastised for not trying to get Beth and her husband to change their stance. I told my mother that it's their baby and they have full control over who gets to hold and see her. Beth and I have also discussed that our mother and stepdad can lose baby privileges if they keep acting up. After I left the conversation, my mom and stepdad continued to talk shit about Beth's decision. I'm just trying to figure out if we are being cruel or if they just can't respect boundaries. I want to add that I have told my mom multiple times that I don't make these decisions and that it's up to the parents how they raise their kid, and that if at any point I see something wrong with that, I will let them know because Beth and I have a relationship where we can let each other know what's up with no filter because we trust each other to try and help one another instead of tear them down. I let Beth know what our parents said as they were saying it because my mom prides herself on never talking behind someone's back, but actually does so regularly, and I don't do that. NTA, no one gets to hold a baby if the parents are not okay with it. It doesn't matter who it is being told no, or why the parents feel whatever kind of way about it. And third parties who plan to continue holding that child themselves, mom, dad, would be wise to back down before they find themselves on the no-hold list for presuming to tell your sister what she has to do with her baby. NTA, nobody but the parents get any say in that decision. Sounds like Carol just needs to be put NC by your sister, brother-in-law, and maybe your parents too, because they are a large part of this problem. If they think it's such a great idea to let an abusive person hold a baby, then maybe they need a sharp reality check. I really hope your sister never lets them babysit, or that child will be in Carol's hands so fast the air will burn. My neighbors across the road, Kate and Dean, mid-20s, have split up and are selling their house. Their split hasn't been good. They're taking it in turns to stay at the house until it sells. As I'm currently home on maternity leave, I often take parcels in for them. When it's Dean's week, he will come over as soon as he can to collect and apologize for the inconvenience. He will also take Kate's parcels over to the house. Kate, however, has a history of being a pain. If a parcel for Dean comes on her week, she refuses to take it in. If a parcel comes for her, she doesn't come over to collect it. We have to take it to her, but she often won't answer the door because she doesn't like to when home alone. My partner and I decided we were going to stop taking anything in for Kate, only for Dean. A parcel arrived for Kate yesterday. She wasn't in, and the delivery guy tried to leave it with me. I refused to take it in, so it went back to the depot. Turns out it was Kate's passport, which she had left last time she was visiting her mom. It was in a box and couldn't go through the letterbox. Kate was meant to be going on holiday early this morning, but now isn't able to as she couldn't get her passport in time. Kate's furious that I've caused her to miss her flight and has been calling me a bitch as she assumed I'd take it in until she saw the card saying it had gone to the depot. She has been complaining to my other neighbor. He doesn't like her and thinks it's funny that she's not learnt her lesson, as she kept refusing to pick up parcels they took in for her. He stopped after breaking his wrist slipping on ice last year, taking her parcel over. Now it's Dean's week. He's been over to ask if I could take a parcel in for him, and he apologized for Kate's behavior. I feel bad that she's missed her flight. Am I the a-hole? We didn't tell Kate that we weren't taking any more parcels in. I had only started doing it to be neighborly as I was home. When my partner lived here on his own, he was never home during the day to take parcels in. We never had an arrangement with them. Seems a bit crazy for her to assume you'd be in to collect her vital parcel a day before a flight. If she knew it was coming that day, she really should have stayed home or explicitly asked you to take it. NTA.